Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you say about someone who's a Christian who feels bad about being male and aggressive? Like, I shouldn't have these urges.
Yeah.
I should be more tame and hospitable and things like that.
I say that is a man who has not been properly challenged. He's been improperly challenged, right? So he may have faced temptation, but he's never faced a high call. Right. So look, you mentioned Genesis. I went right there. I think that's a fantastic example. I think that when you look at, for example, chapter 2, verse 15, and the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. There you go, right? Challenge, work it, keep it. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die. Right? Yeah. Now, verse 18, then the Lord said, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper. But watch what he follows up with that then. Now, out of the ground, the Lord formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called the living creature, that was its name. So to occupy man, right? God looks at man and says, it is not good for him to be alone. The best way for me to occupy men's time is with a healthy challenge, a high call. Let me give him hard work.
Yeah.
Right? So a guy who was afraid of that has not been given hard work. That he's not been properly challenged. Yeah. Because in every biblical example that you see, a man who has temptations, has urges, is moving in not so good a direction, the example of God is always to give him a high call, a positive challenge. Do this. Focus your energy here, right? Because that's really what it is, right?
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it is. This is, when you look at bad men, I'm going to use, right?
Okay.
Toxic men. You're really looking at a man who has not properly focused his God-given energy.
Yeah. It's similar to, you even see this within the Bible a lot of times too. You have these kind of very aggressive, sometimes these very aggressive men who shouldn't be leading, God's people and everything, because they're just a little bit too, they're extra.
Yes. good way of putting it.
Right. They're a little bit extra. It's like, okay, why did you do that, And so when I look at that extraness, and then it's directed, towards, how many people in terms of maybe celebrities or coaches, famous people that we know that did terrible in school, right? Did terrible in school because that was the environment that told them to be calm, to be quiet, to be, to basically have every part of their masculinity, just completely and totally besmirched.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they didn't fit in there. But once they got out into the arena of life, they just soared to another place, And then sometimes, you have people who actually suffer in terms of that aggression to where they never know what to do with that because they've been told their whole lives that that's bad. You're being bad.
Yes.
It's like, no, you're a child sitting in a classroom and you're supposed to go out there and punching things and venturing out and things like that, So you view yourself and your aggression, your masculinity as being bad versus, the thing that you were built to be.
Yeah. So, here's what's fascinating to me about this particular part. When I was in college, I was in my econometrics class. So that is the study of measurements of effects using statistics and probability. Well, that's the short answer. There's more to it than that. Yeah. But one of the things that my professor brought out that I thought was so fascinating that statistically separates men from women is when men show up.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I mean by that. He talked about how if you want to know how well a woman will perform, you can look at her high school record. So you can look at her high school transcripts, and with a pretty high degree of accuracy, you can tell if she was a really good student in high school, if she's got good ACT and SAT scores, chances are pretty high she's going to be a good student in college. And if she was a poor student in high school, chances are pretty high she's going to be a poor student in college. For men, that was not the case. So a man could perform horribly in high school, but in college, all of a sudden, something turns on and he shows up.
Yeah.
Right? Something unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so it is really, I'm going to say, inappropriate for a man to look at maybe some of the mistakes he's made, some of the urges that he feels, and make judgments about himself because he doesn't know how he's going to show up in the right environment. Right? That just, knowing that changed everything. Yeah. Because I got to be honest, right? In high school, I was not a great student.
Yeah, neither was I.
Right?
I was terrible.
But college, I lived in the library. You could not outwork me. I would get up in the morning, 6 or 7 a.m., I'm in the gym working out. Leave the gym, go to the library, study until it was time for class. Leave class, maybe would go have breakfast, go back to the library, study until it was time for class again. Leave that class, maybe go to lunch, go back to the library. Stayed into the library till like 7 at night. I felt like it was my job to work from 7 to 7 on my craft. Yeah. And it wasn't that I didn't struggle in school, but I showed up, right? Yeah. I didn't waste any class. I came there to learn, and I learned. I didn't just study to pass a test. I studied to know information. Yeah. Right? So it was liberating to know that that was normal, that I was not behaving outside the bounds because I struggled in one area, but showed up when the challenge really came. Because, right, I was paying for college. So I took classes that I wanted. I was studying what I wanted, right? Right. So I showed up.
Right. Exactly. And that's kind of what happened to me when I was in high school. So in high school, I got a lot of, just sit down and shut up and everything, and
I'm
probably still needed to. But what was the college experience was so different. So I came in with an attitude when I was in college, kind of beat up from high school, right?
Yes.
So
which is the danger.
Right, exactly. So when I come in there, it's like, okay, am I going to make it? And I wasn't making it for a long time. And then I just challenged myself one time because I was making a book called Melee. It was at that point in time, it was 969 pages.
Wow, man.
And illustrated on a spiral notebook, that I got this. I was just feeding myself this stuff, I loved doing it. And I made a video game on top of that too, to go alongside with the book. So then I began to critically think for a second, saying that, okay, if I can do this, surely I could pass a test.
Yes.
Surely. So when I realized that and put that same aggression towards my studies,
yes,
Dean's List, year 1. Dean's List, year 2.
Yep.
Dean's List. You know what I'm saying? Like I had 4 consecutive Dean's Lists, to my name. So, I was able to get some scholarships, to go straight into, because I was at a community college. So I went to get some scholarships for University of Kentucky and things like that.
Yes.
So, that really, really, that was awesome. So I can identify what you're saying, But what would you say to somebody that is, for example, too, like, here's something interesting I was thinking about today. This is where it might get a little bit of controversy, which I like. But I was thinking about aggression and sexuality. So I saw these gnats that were outside.
Yes.
And I think that some of these gnats, because they're everywhere. I have no idea what's going on right now, but sometimes I guess the weather just affects things to where gnats are just flying in these little clusters, and like the worst thing ever is like walking to a spider web every single time you go outside. It's awful. But I'm thinking that as I'm seeing them on my car, I'm thinking that these two gnats are having some coitus, on top of my car.
That is probably true. We have to go and bless your car when this is over.
So I was like, well, that's not appropriate. No,
yeah.
But I was like, I was sitting there looking at this thing, and they're falling with the windshield and everything, and it's kind of like, good Lord,
Yeah.
And then I look at nature.
Yes.
And I look at the aggression that is actually in sexuality and nature as well.
Yes.
And then I think about, like, men and their sexuality.
Yes.
And how when I was really heavy into, I've had a porn addiction for years. Full disclaimer about that. Most people who know me know about me. So I don't try to hide anything because people like to get you on what you want to hide.
Yes.
And therefore, that's why people get in trouble. I think Lauryn Hill said that too. It's like, y'all just want to know things that you're not supposed to know.
Yes.
So, me. So anyway.
Yeah. No shame. Full disclosure, the Lord has delivered me. It is a wonderful life of freedom now.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So, but as you looked at it, though, you saw the amount of aggression in terms of the sex and sexuality, what I'm saying, that was being displayed. So it wasn't like, you know, you see in the movies or whatever, you know, where it's like, you know, candlelights and this, that, and the third and everything, you know. It was just like aggressive.
Yeah.
So what would you say about, you know, men and their more aggressive attitudes towards sex? We're not, so, because, you know, that's where you're trying to, you know, it's like, well, this is rape culture and things like that, you know what I'm saying? We're not talking about, again, we're putting it in a biblical context of this type of stuff, you know, but what about that aggression that people are afraid of, basically?
So, right, so that's the interesting one, right? I mean, you're walking right, eyes wide open into controversy.
Yeah.
So here's how I would frame that hopefully will be better received. I think that when you are talking about sex and sexuality, I think that one thing that is undeniable, that a wife really loves a husband who is passionate about her.
Yeah.
Right? I think there's just no better way to say that. I think that the danger of pornography is that it really puts sex and sexuality within the context of promiscuity and anger, right? Which is the opposite of passion and discipline.
Yeah.
But I say that aggressive sex in the context of marriage, where there's love, passion, and discipline, is a beautiful thing. I don't know of a wife who would not be receptive to that.
Yeah.
But when you take that love, passion, and discipline off, right? When you take those restraints off, right, then you get something else, and that's not a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But I would not say that the problem is necessarily aggression and sexuality. I would say that the problem is that you have taken the restraints off inappropriately.
Yeah.
Right. So the biblical context is always sex within the institution of marriage, and the Bible pushes hard loving your wife. Right. The Bible pushes hard discipline.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the Bible pushes hard passion. I mean, when you read all through, especially the Old Testament, God is really passionate for his people.
Yeah.
Right. And the Bible describes the great King David as a man after God's own heart, and perhaps one of the most passionate men in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. New and Old Testament.
Yeah. And that aggression that he had kind of manifested within, you know, his warlike nature too.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Right. And as long as he was fighting for the king, fighting the right fights, he didn't get in trouble. Really, he only got in trouble when he focused that aggression in an inappropriate direction.
Yeah.
Right? When he left discipline to pursue his own lust.
Yeah. And that's a really good point too, and just in terms of, you know, Jesus and how passionate he was, you know, about everything. I mean, the guy is sitting here crying over Jerusalem, you know, and I mean, he was crying several times, and that, from what I understand, historically, you know, men don't really do that.
No.
In public, especially.
Yes.
You know, like everything that he did was a controversy in terms of how things are supposed to be done, and men's imitation of what it means to be masculine. So it's kind of like, you know, you go to gangs, for example. Most of the gang members there are doing their best impersonation of a man, and not actually knowing the context in terms of discipline and things like that, controlling themselves as they would imagine themselves to be. So it's like, what ends up happening is that you have a bunch of undisciplined men with a bunch of passion and aggression in them, and when you don't have that discipline and the right context of hey, understand, young man, that you have power.
Yes.
It's not better than women or whatever, you know, it's just different.
Yes.
So when you have that, and it's more physical, and you don't know how to control that, you're going to have bodies in the street.
Yes.
You know, and that happens, you know, a lot of times you see in terms of, you know, the context, you know, of the statistics between young men growing up in fatherless homes and things like that, you know.
Come on.
Like, it's a huge thing. So I grew up, you know, without, I won't say without my dad, but I'll say that I seldom saw him, in contrast to my brother. So my brother has always had more of a discipline thing than I have. So when I was younger, you know, I'd be freaking out all the time. I would be in teachers' faces, you know, kind of cussing them out and things like that, you know, because I thought that because I'm like my mom, right? There's no difference, you know what I'm saying? I can go ahead and be aggressive like my mom is, you know, and expect to put that testosterone in such an emotional environment and that there's not going to be any kind of consequences. And there were. I learned that when I actually got aggravated or got really, really mad at some kind of conversation that happened between my mother and I and everything. We would get into fights all the time.
Yes.
And I just smacked my fist against the wall. And then all of a sudden I knew that there was a hole in the wall.
Yes.
Because I thought I could act just like my mom, because my mom's a very passionate woman also, you know. But, not me also, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
But my mom's a very passionate woman, so therefore I thought I could, you know, do all that extra stuff.
Yes.
And that didn't turn out to be the case. Like, I gotta watch it.
Yes.
I learned that day I had to watch this.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah. So look, you know me, not that my life was perfect, but I had a dad. He was there. He was a godly man. He was a godly example. I had a dad and a mom. So two wonderful parents, right, who certainly made mistakes, right, as I make mistakes, but who I thought were great examples of what it meant to, you know, to be doing the best that you can to please God. And having that as an example for me was wonderful in terms of work ethic and discipline, right?
Yeah.
That made hard work normal.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't recall my dad ever cutting grass. Now, he worked hard, but he made sure that we cut the grass, right? He made sure that we did the chores, right? Yeah. Because hard work was just going to be a part of the package. If you didn't want to work, and he would say this, if you don't work, you need to get out of my house.
My mom would say that to my brother, Bobby, that's why I had you to cut the grass.
Right.
That's why you were born.
So right, I want to marry. Right, I want to revisit what we talked about earlier. Then, what do we do with these passions? I think these passions need to be governed by discipline. So, look, watch this. I like to have at least one verse from the Bible for everything that we talk about, just to ground us.
Sure.
Right, in what we're discussing.
Sure.
So, Job chapter 31. I'm in the Amplified Classic here. So I'm going to read just two verses. Job chapter 31, verses 1 and 2. I dictated a covenant, an agreement to my eyes. How then could I look lustfully upon a girl? For what portion should I have from God above if I were lewd? And what heritage from the Almighty on high?
Wow.
Now, if memory serves, Job had something like 12 kids, and that might not be accurate, right? I need to look it up to get the exact number. But Job had a bunch of kids, so this was not a guy who was living like a monk in a monastery, right? He was a passionate guy. He was a smart guy. He was very successful. He was highly respected, but he was also disciplined.
Yeah, going back to that word again, discipline seems to be the thing that marries it all together.
Yes.
So now, what do you think about too? Moving on to the next subject,